The Pittsburgh Steelers were able to accomplish two different things in week 14 that they weren't able to do all of last season. The first one is rather obvious. They got a win in Baltimore, a place that they went 0-2 last year, including an embarrassing showing in the NFL playoffs. They're able to get the win in week 14, 27-22, and it is a huge win, which we'll get into, but in general, it is a feat that they accomplished, getting the victory in a place that they weren't able to do last year. But the second thing, and most importantly, at least for the entire outlook of this season, is they were able to stop the bleeding. Something that last year, once the bleeding started, it didn't stop until the offseason hit. They lost 5 consecutive games, fell right down the standings, and then finished it off with a loss, like I mentioned, in Baltimore in January. The Steelers entered week 14 losers of 3 of their last 4 games, and instead of the fate that they suffered last year, they're able to stop the bleeding, get the victory, and put themselves in a position, as we'll talk about to close out this video, to really be in the driver's seat in the AFC North and for a home playoff game for the first time in a couple of seasons. When looking at that game on Sunday first, I think that most people would come away saying that the offense carried the day. I mean, Aaron Rodgers has his first 200-yard game, not 300, but 200-yard game since week 9 of this NFL season. Not only did he go over 200 yards, but he had one of his best passing days as a Steeler. 284 yards, 1 passing touchdown, 1 beautiful rushing touchdown, and no interceptions. DK Metcalf had himself one of his best games since becoming a Steeler. 7 receptions, 148 yards, and while he didn't get into the end zone, that's about the only thing he didn't do on Sunday in his first introduction into the Steelers-Ravens rivalry. You had the deep ball to Calvin Austin that went for 31 yards. Shoot, you had 5 plays of 20-plus yards for the Steelers offense, something you haven't seen really at all over the past month and some change. So the offense carried the day. The offense is the thing that you come away looking at this game and saying, all right, that's what stood out. But there were some big plays made on the defensive side of the ball as well. I wouldn't say that there was consistent success, certainly whenever you look at the rushing attack for the Baltimore Ravens, but there were big plays made by players that you needed to step up. Players that in a rivalry game like this, if you don't get them stepping up, you typically end up losing the game because the stars are all accounted for. They almost cancel each other out in these types of rivalry games. You need the unexpected heroes to step up, specifically for a Steelers defense that has really needed to have unsung heroes make big plays for them to win games this year. Brandon Echols, I think, is the first name that comes to mind because the way he started, the first quarter that he had was one of the best first quarters we've seen a Steelers defensive back have in multiple years, right? He put a stop to all of the first 3 drives for the Baltimore Ravens in that game. First drive, they're driving down the field into the red zone. They throw it into the end zone on 3rd down. Brandon Echols breaks up the pass, forces them into a field goal. Second drive, he chases down Lamar Jackson on 3rd down, gets the sack, and forces the punt. And on the 3rd drive, he has another pass breakup that ends that drive. So a great start by Brandon Echols is what allowed the Steelers to build that 10-point lead that they had in the first quarter. Alex Highsmith has a walk-off sack. That's a huge play. And then you look at Patrick Queen, somebody who the Steelers are hoping is somebody that can bring this energy every single week, was all over the field against Baltimore. And I think that when you look at Patrick Queen versus his former team, in the 2 games where he's showed up and he's played like an absolute menace, the Steelers have won. That happened in the first matchup last year. It didn't quite happen in the second and third, and the Steelers lost. Well, on Sunday, Patrick Queen shows up in a big way despite battling through an injury, and the Steelers walk away victorious. Coincidence? I'd say not. So those are the positives. But there's still plenty of issues. I mean, for one, on the offensive side of the ball, for a team that came into this season saying that their identity is still going to be rushing the ball first and then letting Aaron Rodgers pick teams apart after that, they had only 34 rush yards. That's not good enough. Even if Aaron Rodgers is throwing for 284, you need to have a better rushing attack to be able to compete in December and in January. So they need to figure it out a little bit better on the ground. And I understand it's hard whenever you're missing your left tackle. It's a huge absence of Broderick Jones. I thought Andreas Pete was okay, but mainly in the passing game. You need to have a better rushing attack. You need more than 34 yards. They know that. I'm not saying anything that's reinventing the wheel there. The defense, on the other hand, like I mentioned, they made some big plays, but the consistent success wasn't there against the Ravens. They allowed over 200 rushing yards again to the Baltimore Ravens, a team that really is the reason that they went out and made the moves that they did this offseason, because the Ravens were able to just run the ball at will on Wild Card Weekend back in January. And they were able to run the ball at will again against the Steelers. Like I mentioned, over 200 rushing yards allowed. And then on top of that, you gave up a 100-yard receiver. So it's not like it was a one-dimensional game for Baltimore. They were able to get it done through the air and on the ground. And the last thing that I'll point to as something that you still look at and you still make sure that it's in the back of your mind when you're watching this team and when you're trying to project what you think this team can do the rest of the season, they were outscored 13-10 in the second half. Outscored again. This team just does not win whenever you make the adjustments. They don't win in the second half. Now, they were able to hold on because they built a big enough lead, but still, a second half where the offense goes quiet and the defense is on their heels again. Not something that you're happy seeing become a habit for the Steelers. Not only were they outscored 13-10, but they were also inches away from the game trailing touchdown. It was the right call. The third foot didn't come down in time, but it was about a fraction of a second before Isaiah Likely's foot was about to hit the turf, and the Steelers would have went down at that point 28-27 pending an extra point. So there's plenty to work on for the Steelers, but there's plenty that was better in this game as well. And at the end of the day, when you walk out with the win, that's the most important thing of all, because once you get to the playoffs, and I understand the competition is probably going to be a little bit tougher than what you saw out of Baltimore on Sunday. I mean, they didn't have a pass rush, point blank, plain and simple. Most teams you're going to play in the postseason are going to have, at the very least, a half-decent pass rush. But at the end of the day, in the playoffs, they don't ask how you got it done. They just ask, did you get it done? W or L, that's all that matters at the end of the day once we get past Week 18. And on Sunday, they got the W. So let this serve as a reset. I know the Steelers are, but as a fan base, this needs to be a reset, because the Steelers need to forget about that losing 3 games in 4 weeks thing. They need to forget about the dreadful performances in the second half against Buffalo, in the second half the week prior to the Buffalo loss in Chicago. This needs to be a reset for them, because that's how they went into the week treating it. Serious changes at the wide receiver position. We saw Roman Wilson inactive on Sunday, and Roman Wilson's somebody who's been winning his matchups one-on-one. He just hasn't been getting the ball. He gets sat down in favor of 2 veterans, MVS and Adam Thielen, and those 2 receivers combined for 1 reception. So Roman Wilson wasn't sat down because they think they can get more production out of those 2. He was sat down because right now, the Steelers aren't a team that is predicated on production from the wide receiver position outside of DK Metcalf. And you can have your disputes with that, but that's just the facts that are in front of us. The Steelers go to DK Metcalf first in the passing game. Then they go to Kenneth Gainwell. And then they go to one of their trio or quartet, if you want to include Connor Hayward, of tight ends. That's the list. That is the progression when it comes to Steelers and their receivers. Then you get Calvin Austin sprinkled in. Then you might get Adam Thielen sprinkled in. But they built this offense to exist and survive without a wide receiver too. So they're going with the veterans in favor of the younger player. Does it stink for Roman Wilson? 100%. Probably need to have a longer conversation on it. But I think what you're looking at right now is the Steelers saying, we can't wait for somebody to come along and find his role in this offense. We need veterans to come in, know their role, and do their job. I'm not saying Roman wasn't doing his job. I'm just saying that's the vibe that you get from the outside, is they want veterans that can go in there, know the job, do the job, and get it done. And that's what they did on Sunday. Like I mentioned, not like they made a huge impact on the box score. Adam Thielen threw a couple big blocks. MVS was out there on that long touchdown run to Jalen Warren. I guess it was a touchdown pass. Not that he had to do very much, but he was out there. And it's noticeable whenever you have a player that you're playing for the first time in the entire season, and he's out there on one of the biggest plays of the game. Just something you take note of. So I'm interested to see how that shakes out. But that was part of the reset. James Pierre getting the full-time nod at cornerback 2. That was a reset as they let go of Darius Slay last week. And it all leads to a road win in the division. So it might be minimal moving and minimal roster lineup changes, but it led to a win. So let's see where it goes from here. Now, here's the thing. As we look towards the future for the Steelers and the remainder of this season, that game gave them much needed breathing room. They're now in the driver's seat in the AFC North. And I know it's a weird spot to be in because the Baltimore Ravens technically still control their own destiny as well. If they win out, they win the AFC North. Why? Because the Steelers and the Ravens play in Week 18 in Pittsburgh. But as of right now, the Steelers are firmly in the driver's seat because of what's next for both teams. The Steelers go into this stretch, the final 4 weeks, with a 1-game lead on the Baltimore Ravens. And because of that win in Baltimore on Sunday, you don't have to worry about winning in Detroit. That game was going to be an uphill battle no matter where you were in the standings because Detroit is a juggernaut. Not as much as they used to be in the last couple of years, but they are still a team that is to be reckoned with, especially on home field. But now you don't have to win that game. But what you do have to do is beat Miami at home next Monday and beat Cleveland the week after you come back from Detroit. Because if that happens, at worst, you have a win and in Week 18 game at home against Baltimore. Now, you'd hope that it doesn't get to that point, but that's the other side of this win that is so important. It forces the Baltimore Ravens to have to win 2 of their next 3 games for a chance to make that a win and in game in Pittsburgh. And one of those wins has to be against the Bengals next week. You look at what's left for the Baltimore Ravens before they come to Pittsburgh. At Cincinnati, a matchup that they lost on home field on Thanksgiving night by 18 points. Then you have to host the Patriots and visit the Packers in Lambeau before coming to Pittsburgh. They would have to win the Bengals game and one of 2 of Patriots and Packers matchups just to have a chance in Week 18. And that's if the Steelers win against Miami, which they should be able to do in Pittsburgh next Monday night, and win in Cleveland. Those are 2 matchups you should win, and you put the pressure on Baltimore to have to win 2 of 3 really tough matchups against Cincy, New England, and Green Bay. So while, yes, Baltimore technically controls their own fate, the Steelers are firmly in the driver's seat, and that's because they were able to get a reset in the middle of the season and get a big victory over the Baltimore Ravens. That's going to do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Remember, if you enjoy this content, to like, share, and subscribe to my channel at Nick Belsky. But that's it for this one. We'll see you guys next time.